We'll call this meeting to order. This is the June 10th, 2020 regular meeting of the Schertz Planning and Zoning Commission. Item number 2, seat alternate. We have both alternates with us tonight, Mr. Platt and Mr. Odom. Welcome, by the way. Get to know these guys. Okay. Item number 3, hearing of residents. Did we have no one signed up? Did we get any emails or anything to read? No. Okay. Item number 4, workshop and discussion. Workshop presentation and discussion related to the JBSA Joint Land Use Study Compatible Use Plan Update.
There we go. Good evening, Commissioners. So as y'all might have remembered, Mr. Bro a couple meetings back asked for an update on the JBSA Joint Land Use Study, understanding that we're going through this process again, kind of what the plan is, had a bunch of questions. We thought it was more appropriate to actually get the group that is putting together the study to come and make the presentation. So it's my honor to introduce Mr. Larry Dotson with ACOG that will introduce the consultant that's actually doing the study.
Thank you, Emily. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Larry Dotson. I'm the Compatible Use Program Manager for the Alamo Area Council of Government. In my role, I administer the grant, federal grant from the Office of Economic Adjustment to conduct a regional Joint Base San Antonio compatible use plan. I understand many of you are former Air Force or retired Air Force. Thank you for your service. I'm retired Army, so always like to be in the outnumbered fight, so that's always good to start off with. But seriously, this is different than the joint land use studies that you're used to. When the consultants start giving you the presentation, they're gonna show you how it differs from prior JLUS studies. But the big thing is, well, our charge is to look at the whole of Joint Base San Antonio from Randolph Field all the way to Lackland, including Camp Bullis and also Martindale Army Airfield, and find the regional issues and develop regional implementation strategies to address those regional issues. So it's a little bit broader, more comprehensive. It's not that tactical joint land use study that you're used to that's focused on an airfield, typically. So this is a little different, but our consultant team, we have one of the best consultant teams in the country, Matrix Design Group. They did our last JLUS study in the region, and they know San Antonio really well. The team consists of Celeste Warner, who is the executive vice president or executive for Matrix, Mr. Mike Rapla, who is the lead project manager, Patrick Small, who I believe is going to lead the pitch tonight. He's a lead project planner, and Andrew Brown, who's also a project planner. So with that, I'll turn it over to the video. And Patrick, if you're pitching, go ahead.
Good evening. This is Mike Rappa. Can you go to the next slide, please? Can you go to the next slide, please? I'd like to introduce the key members of our team that are working on the Regional Compatible Use Plan. We have Celeste Warner, who's the project director, and she also was the project manager for the Randolph Air Force Base Joint Land Use Study. So a few might have remembered her as we went through that project a few years ago. I'm the project manager. I also was involved in the Randolph and the other projects. We also have Patrick Small. Patrick worked on the Randolph joint land use study also. And we have Andrew Bryan, who is a new member of our team. This is the core team that is going to work with the different communities and yourselves as we move forward. Next slide. We're going to cover several items here, a little bit of background, an overview, who are all the partners in this project, and then look at the timeline, and then talk about the role that the city of Schertz has in the overall process. Next slide. As I kind of mentioned, the previous joint land use efforts have been done throughout the San Antonio region. Again, we were the team that worked the Randolph JLOs back in 2015. From that came a number of recommendations and strategies for the surrounding communities in the installation to address the identified at that time the compatibility concerns and issues. At the same time, in 2015, we were developing a JLUS implementation strategy that was trying to look at the commonality between the different joint land use studies. But the most important recommendation that we needed to work on was to find an entity to be the integrator for the communities for the San Antonio region. At the same time, the military was also consolidating their efforts into the JBSA construct, and so it made sense to have a regional entity working with the regional military entity. So we, in the process, identified ACOG as the best fitted organization to address these concerns. They picked up that responsibility, and from that has generated one of these issues, which is this study here, which is the Regional Compatible Use Plan. And so that's the relationship that we have moving forward based on the objectives that Larry also outlined. Can you go to the next slide, please? So in the implementation phase, there were 110 compatibility recommendations, and these were from simple to more complex, from ones that were easy to do and others that required resources and time. Of those, about 70 had application to the city. The important thing to understand is this effort today is to look at the regional implementation, to look at those things across the spectrum of San Antonio, look at how we can apply best practices and lessons, but also to look at the partnerships and to see how we can leverage the different resources. And then identify those regional components that all the enterprises, all the stakeholders can support as the region looks for solutions and guidance for a regional compatibility. One of the other elements that are coming out of the partnership with ACOG is to develop GIS tools on a regional basis that can help the decision-making process at all levels. Next slide, please. Next slide. Here. So one of the reasons why this effort has value is that there's been changes and evolutions that are occurring in these different areas to include missions and technology. At the same time, the communities and the stakeholder organizations are also seeing growth and development. The region is expanding, and we're trying to ensure that these things can be done in a compatible way to ensure that economic engine and the military mission can be sustained in the San Antonio area. Next slide. Next slide. this gives you an idea of all the stakeholders that have equity in this process. The process is built on 4 different components. With the installations, the 3 of them that are the JBSA, Bullis, Lackland, and Randolph. They all have different drivers, different areas of concern, and the geographies are different with their communities. So it's a very complex scenario as we try to drive some level of integration and consistency across the region as we try to achieve the compatibility goals for the military and the communities. In addition, in this exercise, the Texas Army National Guard installation at Martindale Army Airfield was added, and so they became the 4th component of looking at the regional construct and the regional picture. Next slide. Next slide, please. Back up. My system dropped. Can the slides go back up? Okay. So we're trying to look at the current scenario and trying to bring it up to speeds, and then look at how things are forming up for the future, because that's where the best bang for the buck is to take those compatibility areas that are relatively good and try to figure out how to preserve them and develop and shape the development that contains the economic development for the different stakeholders, but also protect that military mission. So we're looking at those regional opportunities. We're going to try to frame them into regional strategies that will have the different stakeholder have supporting components to it. And as I mentioned, enhanced GIS tools for the decision-making process for all the constituents and decision makers in the region. And from that will come an overall playbook for implementation moving forward. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide.
There's no way to talk to him?
Mike,
Okay, this slide gives you an idea of where we are in the process. We're in the early stages of that process, and we're reaching out through the different communities and working with the 2 committees, the policy committee and the working committee. There are 3 separate working groups that we're working with that have a focus on their installation, also integrating it across the regional process. We're working to have the product and implementation actions completed near the end of the year. And right now we're on track to get there. We're going to be in the process of developing those specific strategies. There'll be a draft report that will go out for all the communities through their working group and policy members to review. And from that, we'll finalize the mapping tools that will be used as informational decision-making system information in the November timeframe, and we'll wrap it all up with a report and the tools that will be incorporated in ACOG for use by all the constituents. Next slide. Next slide.
Mike, just so that you know, there's a delay in the slide transition, so.
Okay. So we're going to go through, obviously, from a city perspective, you want to see what is the benefit of the participation in this process. And we're looking for new opportunities in tools and recommendations that can assist the city in supporting the overall region, and specifically Randolph Air Force Base in most cases. A relook at the existing joint land use studies. Those studies aren't going to be replaced. Those actions are still viable. They might be modified somewhat based on the information that we've identified or actions that have taken place over the last 5 years. And again, trying to get those tools that can give the decision makers in the city additional information to help in that process. Next slide. So why should the city participate? Why should you be a key stake in the process? Because we're trying to assist in protecting the economic development of your community, as well as the value of JBSA Randolph to the city. We want to help support the city interests, but by making sure that those things can be compatible with the current mission today and what is projected in the future. The key here is collaboration through partnerships. There's ongoing partnership with the Northeast communities. We're trying to incorporate that into the overall process. We're trying to make sure that we capture the city's vision and growth for the next several decades. And the other key is to ensure that the information flows out from the installation, as well as Gein Auxiliary Airfield in Guadalupe County, that have the potential to affect not only Randolph, but the city. Next slide. So how can you participate? What are we looking forward? We're looking for your participation on the committees. We're looking to make sure we have the most up-to-date and accurate information as we do analysis. We are looking for your input and how you can articulate these issues and recommendations. Are they relevant to the city as well as your constituents? Again, working with the working group and having the right members participate in providing the insight and feedback on the development of the strategies as well as the review of the strategies and ultimately the final report in those GIS tools that can assist in that process. The policy committee members provide that leadership, and as I mentioned, we're looking at it on a regional basis, but there are elements that go down to each stakeholder, and that's where your policy member plays a role both at a regional level and then looking internally to their own community. So we're looking for that organizational support, not only today in the development of the regional compatible use plan, but also in the execution and the implementation going forward. And we're also looking to see the synergism and the sharing of the best practices or initiatives that the other communities have done that might assist the city in their development of what they think they can support and execute into the future. Next slide. So we're open for questions. And we have the team on the meeting, and so if you have any questions, if you want, we'll direct them to the most appropriate team member that can answer your question.
All right. Thank you very much for that presentation. Commissioners, anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start out. I asked this to be placed on an agenda basically to get an update on where we were on the JLUIS, because as a commission we had some input in the beginning and then it sort of disappeared, and there was a lot of stuff in there that pertained to Schertz and to Randolph and the surrounding areas. And, I don't recall if we were ever given updates on any of that stuff that was happening. So what I gather from this is that the joint land use study is just going to kind of go away. And is this completely brand new, or is it a continuation of what the joint land use was?
There are new elements to it. The other component is looking at it at a regional level, but some of the underlying concerns and issues, if there still exist, are still a part of the original joint land use studies. So if you look at it in a kind of integrated perspective, each joint land use study still has validity moving forward. The regional construct is the new component and the tools that will come out of the process.
And when I said we haven't been updated, it's not my expectation that ACOG is going to come here and update the Planning and Zoning Commission. I was addressing that primarily to the staff to keep us updated on where this is going. Who is the? I'm not sure how to ask this, but what is the compatibility use plan? Who is it being written for? Is it being written for the military community or the community as a whole? Who's the customer on this?
I can take that, Commissioner. So it's being written as a standing document to influence elected policy officials, policymakers, commissioners on planning and zoning commissions. So it is recognized by Senate Bill 6 as informing development in and around military bases as a JLUS. We're going to have to solicit a definition change with our legislative initiative coming out of this compatible use plan to change it to compatible use plan. But that said, it's intended to be a document that is referenced to inform municipal and county development. So it becomes one of the reference documents when you're doing a new city plan or a new neighborhood plan. It's intended to provide a foundation of understanding for all the existing issues that may affect that area that's being looked at for revision and planning. It's also intended to inform and drive implementation of updated city ordinances or county ordinances or state law. We're not there yet on this round of pulling out, extracting what are the essential regional elements and what policy recommendations we're going to make coming out of that. But once we make those, gain consensus, especially at the policy level with our policy committee, once we get that endorsement and once we publish a plan, those will be the implementation strategies of record that are intended to inform and influence policymakers in the region.
I'm just thinking, wasn't that one of the points of the joint land use study? Or I don't have anything against doing the compatibility study. It's great. I've told city staff before I was involved in 3 BRACs, and BRACs scare me, and we need to do everything possible that we can to protect what we have here in San Antonio and especially next door at Randolph. And I didn't see much coming out of the JLUS that helped us out on that. I'm hoping this has more effect than the joint land use study did.
If I may, Commissioner.
Sure, go ahead.
So yes, we're very attuned to doing something with the document. It is a policy driver. It should be a policy driver. One of the things that we're doing in the analysis phase is we've brought in the entire data set of GIS data for cities and counties for all layers of map analysis. We've brought that in. We've researched all the city ordinances, and we've aligned those to our maps. So and our website's up, and you can see the preliminary maps that we've produced. But we're looking at light illumination issues. We're looking at development issues in development trends. We're looking at density issues. So there's a lot of issues that we're looking at that we will. It may not affect Randolph, but it might affect Lackland and Camp Bullis. If it affects 2 or more bases, we're going to pull that up to the regional level. So again, it won't have the fidelity for Randolph that the 2015 JLUS had, but it doesn't invalidate the 2015 JLUS for Randolph. It just updates and carries forward. And we've scrubbed the list of things that we said we would do in 2015 and what hasn't been done. So those will be findings of record that if they weren't done, they'll be identified for priority solutions.
Thank you. Commissioners, anyone else? Speaking personally, I think, first of all, thank you very much for this presentation. I had no idea that this regional thing was going on. I think part of the concern, what we were hoping for, is the current JLUS came out, and we had some significant issues in southern Schertz, off the runways, between the runways. Some of the land use expectations, I think, that were in the report seemed a little extreme. And so that's kind of where it was left. We So we were just curious where it was going, and I think that was probably really, although I appreciate this, was probably more of an internal thing about were we still pursuing any of those issues, or have we now put those on the back burner? I think that's might be Commissioner Brode. Is that?
That's what I meant to say.
All right.
You're the chairman.
Okay, commissioners, any more questions on this issue? You guys speak up. I mean, you know, no? All right. Well, sir, thank you very much. And Mike and your crew out there online, again, thank you very much. This is an interesting look where I think the regional approach makes a lot of sense, and we look forward to seeing what the results are. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you.
Okay, item number 5 on the agenda is our consent agenda. We have a single item, the minutes from the May 27th, 2020 regular meeting. Commissioners, do we need to pull that from consent for any discussion? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion, we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
So I have a motion to accept the consent agenda from Commissioner Greenwald, a second from Commissioner Broad. Any other comments or discussions? Call for the vote. Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, 7 ayes, no nays, motion passed. Item number 6 is a public hearing. ZC 2020-004, hold a public hearing, consider and make a recommendation on a request to rezone approximately 0.5 acres of land from single-family residential district R2 to general business district GB located at 603 Main Street, City of Schertz, Guadalupe County, Texas. We'll start this public hearing with a presentation by staff. When staff is done, if the applicant would like to make a presentation, we'll entertain that. Then when they're done, we will take comments from anyone wishing, from the public, wishing to comment on this. And then finally, we'll open it up for commissioners' questions and discussions. Nick?
Got to turn the mic on. All right. As you said, this is a zone change application for 603 Main Street to the General Business District. For familiarity's sake, this is the subject property outlined in green. It's at that southwest corner of Main Street and Randolph Ave. So prior to the meeting, public hearing notices were sent out to the surrounding property owners. So far, at the time of this presentation, we've received one response in opposition to the proposed zone change and one response in favor of the proposed zone change. So what you have here on your screen is a copy of the comprehensive land use plan. As you can see, that block between Main Street and Exchange is designated as the Main Street commercial future land use designation, and it's also designated as part of the future historic downtown Schertz area. And as you know, the objective for the historic downtown Schertz area is to eventually fill out that block with local independent businesses while during the time of development encouraging the use of existing buildings. While traditionally the Main Street mixed-use zoning district has been used to aid that transition of some of the older residential properties to what the comprehensive plan has envisioned for that downtown area, the Main Street mixed-use zoning district does not support the restaurant land use by right. This is primarily due to the reduced parking requirements that come with the properties that are zoned to Main Street mixed-use and the potential problems that could arise if a restaurant only had 2 allotted parking spaces on a specific lot per the zoning code, and especially on a property that's located in this area that could be potentially physically constrained. The applicant will be required to comply with all parking regulations within the UDC if this zone change is approved to general business, though. So even though the proposed zoning application isn't to Main Street mixed-use district for the Main Street commercial designation, the general business district will allow this property to accomplish the goals set forth by the comprehensive plan for historic downtown Schertz area by fulfilling, two of its primary objectives. The newly developed restaurant, if approved, will be a local independent business unique to Schertz. Number two, the applicant will be taking advantage of existing buildings on site by repurposing the home that's there into the eventual restaurant. This is a copy of the current zoning map on your left and a copy of the proposed through this application on the right. As you can see, currently the subject property, again outlined in green, surrounded by single-family residential zone properties and a host of general business zone properties that round out the intersection between Randolph Avenue and Main Street. So the proposed zone change to general business shouldn't have much of an adverse impact on the majority of these properties here designated for the commercial land uses. And so with that, staff is recommending approval of the proposed zone change to general business. I just wanted to reiterate that what I was talking about in the analysis, that even though the Main Street Mixed Use District is traditionally used on Main Street, in that Main Street commercial area to aid in that transition, the GB zoning will still allow this property to accomplish those goals set forth for historic downtown Schertz. But like I said, utilizing the existing structure on site and developing a local independent business. The applicant is here. I believe Nick is here. If you have any questions, we're both available.
All right, thank you, sir. Would the applicant like to make a presentation or just wait for questions? Your choice.
I can just say a few words about it in detail. My name is Nick Marquez. I was here last week. Just kind of want to give you a better idea of what I'm trying to do and how this fits in with the goal of Main Street, and then what I'm trying to accomplish on Main Street is I own the bar house as well, and also the property next door to the bar house, and 539 Main Street, and then 603 Main Street. So all these are meant to be business related. It's only going to be one bar. The Purple Pig barbecue restaurant is going to go in next to the bar house, and then this will be another restaurant. We're working on 2 or 3 people that are interested to take over at least this property for a restaurant. The parking, I imagine, will be the best question, so let's get to that. There's a large piece of property in the back already that I can convert into parking as needed. Furthermore, 536 Main Street, which is right across the street, is the old Lisa's Family Hair Salon. I recently purchased that, and we are going to level that and turn it into parking for the restaurant use. Without that extra parking, I mean, it will work, but it won't work as well. So that's 24 spaces we have on that space, including the bar house shared parking, including what we include into the 603 Main Street property. The city just redid that strip right there, and then there's a commercial driveway there, so it's already started for our parking pad that could be back there. You know, that's about it. I can go into a lot of detail, but I don't want to take all night. So I'd rather answer questions if that's the purpose.
That's fine. All right, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
At this time, I'll open the public hearing for public comments. Anyone wishing to comment on this project, please step up to the microphone. See, I say that, and they always rush right up here, don't they? No one? One more time? Anyone in the audience like to give us any input? All right, seeing none, we'll close that portion of the public hearing. Commissioners, it's up to you.
How much parking will we have on Main Street itself?
On the actual street?
Yeah. Or is it wide enough for parking now, or?
I don't believe there's designated parking spaces on the street stripe.
There's a bunch by the car repair place. I mean, I thought part of the remake of Main Street was to put parking or allow parking on Main Street. and maybe we can get you back up, but could you summarize what he said by pointing to the map where all these places are going to be? I think I know where the bar place is. Yeah.
So the bar house is here.
Yep.
We have about 7 here. Also have a contract with the bank parking lot. For the weekend. We usually pull up a road here, another road here, and then this space on the weekend. Also, the city lot here has 20 spaces. So on the weekend, we pull off that. This is the current house here.
Right.
And I already, the engineer has already set this out, so this house will come down. We will expand the paved parking to the railroad line, and that will be 24 spaces. And then here, on the weekends, essentially, you know, we can fit on-street parking with no blockage of driveways or any issue like that coming all the way down to here. This property here is also an extra addition. That's the hair salon property where there's 7 parking spaces here, and then we're adding concrete here to add another 5 spaces. And I may continue in talks with as many people as possible. There's an empty lot here that have expressed interest about paving the lot.
And the Purple Pig is going next to the bar house?
Correct. There's a beauty salon here. This beauty salon will move down to 603 Main Street, and the Purple Pig will have a permit. 619 Main Street. And the Purple Pig will move into here.
I'm asking all these questions because I know a restaurant needs parking, and, you know, people get upset about not being able to park. But based on all that you just said, are you going to have to do anything to the front yard of that house, or is that going to stay the same?
For 603 Main Street?
Where are the restaurants going?
I would like to, we're just going to do sidewalks in the front. I don't want to ruin the ambiance or the appeal of the historic nature of the property. Plus, it would only probably get maybe 3 or 4 spaces out, which is not feasible on that. On the backside, as I mentioned, if needed, and we will meet the requirements, we can fit probably 10 to 12 spaces in the back.
Oh, you need room for delivery and maintenance.
Correct.
And all that
I
kind
mean,
of stuff.
there's a double commercial driveway that can come in and then come back out. And also, right now, the best use, and it's allowed in code, at least in other cities I've done this in, there's allowed in code where the delivery trucks can stay on Main Street quickly, they put their cones out and they leave. That's the ideal thing. Was with the 18-wheelers coming in, it happens in Cibolo, it happens here. I know Rocket's Feed gets delivers already. There's really no.
Because the thing I didn't want to see in this project, and it sounds like we won't have to go that far, is to rip up that front yard.
I don't want to. Yes, absolutely.
So he'll be able to get away from doing that, right? We won't have to rip all that stuff up.
Yeah, we looked in the backyard already, and there's plenty of parking spaces allotted. Plus, with the parking lot across the street as a shared parking agreement, and the other ones, we will meet the requirements.
Okay. Appreciate your efforts in all this. This is awesome.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate it. Any other questions?
Mr. Odom, go ahead.
So the residence that's right behind that property, if you do make a parking lot there, is there going to be something to screen that area from the residence that lives right behind there?
Yes, so we're kind of doing with the same goal of Bar House. You know, the Bar House fence was designated to block from residents. You know, the metal, rustic, still look professional and nice, but look back. But yes, we're going to put a fence pretty much from the green here and then all the way down here. That will block that. This resident did approve that. I have discussed what I'm doing, and they're all for it. And they're, you know, I can't discuss the other things, unfortunately, but they're on board with the parking and a possible extension parking in the future.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead.
Just for reference, I know it's your first one, specifically with properties that are non-residential adjacent to properties that are either zoned for residential or used for residential, regardless of the zoning, there would need to be the appropriate screening measures put in between those properties.
Anyone else?
Well, I've got a question for staff.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes.
Why are we choosing GB versus the Main Street zoning?
Land use. Land use restrictions. So the restaurant land use is not permitted by right. within the Main Street mixed use, particularly because the advantages of only requiring 2 parking spaces to aid in that transition and that flexibility of single-family residential to also low-intensity commercial that comes with restrictions for type of business. And so that was recognized when putting into the permitted uses table, and so the restaurant is not permitted by right within the Main Street mixed-use zoning district. And since the goal is to do a restaurant, he needed a zoning district that would permit that.
I hear you, I just don't remember that we restricted restaurants.
Yeah, to a specific use permit, so.
Well, that's a good segue into my comments.
Sure.
Number one, sir, the project sounds exciting. As we travel around the Hill Country and even locally here, you stumble across these nice little restaurants, Harmon's Barbecue, and I've always wondered why we don't have those kinds of things in Schertz. So please, my comments are not aimed at your project at all. I'd certainly like to see it go in, but I'm going to follow up on Commissioner Evans. You're absolutely correct that a restaurant is not permitted by right in MSMU, in the Main Street mixed use, is allowable with a special use permit. However, there are 2 other zoning classifications below GB that do allow restaurants, office and professional and neighborhood service. And so I'm kind of the same mind. Why did we jump all the way to general business? And here are my concerns for staff. Main Street mixed use appears to be a relatively new zoning, because when I look at the zoning map, I only see 4 properties that are zoned MSMU, and then on what I call the south side of Main Street, that's all general business, and over on the north side, it's general business up to Randolph. But again, looking at the land use plan and knowing that council, the effort that they're putting into turning Main Street into a destination, if you will, if certainly for local residents, if not for other people. I'm a little concerned that we allow this general business to continue to creep up along and eat up properties on Main Street when the lesser zonings, and in particular the special use permit, gives the city much more control over what eventually ends up there. As we all know, and again, this is not personal or your project, but once we rezone this property general business, okay, you're in the planning department, you know that list of things that can go in there, and how many of those things on that list do we want as part of our Main Street project, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm going off the top of my head. I only printed out the 1 page. Liquor stores, I mean, there's just a whole list of things in there that you really wouldn't. I kind of think what we're shooting for. Bernie's a good example. Fredericksburg, where their main drag, there are all these unique shops and restaurants and stuff like that. And I don't know that we can get there with general business. I would feel much more comfortable, and if we want, because you can work the parking issues with a special use permit, or I'm assuming that office professional and neighborhood services would again be subject to the same rules. So again, I'm just wondering if we can't get to where we want to be with something less than general business. Okay.
Sure. I mean, that's always a risk you run, like you talked about. It's not just for this one specific business. It's zoning for, at this point in time, forever, like you were talking about, and the host of land uses that could be in the permitted uses table that you may or may not necessarily want to see within that Main Street redevelopment program. I guess speaking about your first point about why, simply for uniformity with what is there around that corner with the rest of the general business corners, we felt staff felt it was more appropriate to go to that specific zoning district. simply for uniformity with adjacent development. And then regarding doing this zone change instead of, like you talked about, for the specific use permit with the Main Street mixed use zoning district, timing of development, it was kind of a compromise between what Nick wanted to do versus the time frame that was allotted to have this development go through. As you know, as the use permit involves, at this point would involve full site plan certifications, full site plan application, and then all going to the Planning and Zoning Commission and then City Council. So we thought the marriage between the two ideas would be the general business zoning district. It still allowed the applicant to meet the goals of the comprehensive plan and meet his development goals while still being uniform with that entire intersection there. But I do understand your concerns, yes.
Well, but thank you for the explanation. At least there was a reason why you skipped over these other two and went straight to GB. But let me share with you the fact that the other three corners are general business. I think we need to look at what we're trying to do down there and at some point draw a line and say, okay, just because GB is across the street doesn't mean we have to do GB on this side of the street if we can get where we want to be with something less. And again, I really like the idea of a restaurant downtown, depending on who goes in there, but still, it would be nice to have that small town type place rather than the big chains that we have now.
Absolutely.
You mind?
No, go ahead.
Kind of just go off what you were saying. Definitely understand on the zoning side what you're, the open-sidedness. So, nothing personal there. Don't worry. But since you were mentioning Bernie, Fredericksburg, things like that, kind of want to just kind of step in. I usually don't try to keep some of my stuff private. I'm just, But I've been in Schertz since 1990.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I love the city of Schertz. I'm doing this for a reason. I have those same goals in mind that you have. I think everyone has. But I don't like to compare, though. The Bernie, the Fredericksburgs, the Cibolos, the Green Halls, it's all very different. I think what Schertz has is unique, and unfortunately has not been tapped into probably for 50 years, and it's just more than these 4 properties that I'm doing. It's the development of these properties in a classy, nice way to fit the Schertz, Cibolo, and surrounding areas, and also affordability as well, which will hopefully bring more people to kind of meet the goal of this. But, with northern Schertz being what it is, and then southern Schertz blowing up, this is the ideal place to put, in my opinion, a Fredericksburg Mile or things like that. But, I'm not just doing this corner here. There's the middle properties here of 619 Main Street and 700 Main Street, and also 824, 820, and 816 is on the edge. That's the main goal there. So we're demolishing 824 Main Street, 820 Main Street, and the plans to turn in later this year a new downtown building, retail on the bottom, office on the top. So that goal, you're kind of essentially, it's on the cusp there. So I understand the zoning issues that's completely different, but I just want to give you guys kind of the idea and vision of what I'm really trying to do, and make sure you go that I don't want the liquor stores in there or other businesses I can't really mention, things like that. I want the proper things. Plus, I'm also the landowner. I'm not looking to get someone to fill a lease that cannot fulfill a lease or going to cause issues or cause liability. I want long-term use, 5, 10, 15-year uses, that lasts a long time. And also, the whole goal is to increase the values of it too. So, but yeah, that's it.
And I appreciate that, and I think you've showed your vision, and it certainly, in my mind, works hand in hand with what the City Council's vision is for Main Street. I spent 20 years as a fire marshal, and one of the things we always did is we planned for the worst case scenario. And the only point I'm trying to make is once we zone this, and to answer your question, Nick, if there was any way we could do it, I would start rezoning the general business even. But where I was going is once we zone this general business, we've lost all control of the type of facility that can be built there. And at least with a lesser zoning, honestly, I would like to see it stay with Main Street mixed use and come in with a special use permit, which based on your reputation and your previous projects, I don't think would have any trouble. It's extra work and workload in that, but it retains the city's control over where this property is in the future. Now, let me ask a procedural question. We're going to make a recommendation one way or the other tonight to City Council. How long does it take for that to get on the council agenda?
Like following, usually we notice on Wednesdays for the City Council meeting. The way this one had been scheduled, it is already scheduled for a City Council meeting. I forget which one, I believe the 23rd, which is the next one that it was on.
Yeah,
I got notice
sounds
for
about right. So it's
last Wednesday, yes.
okay. So that's 2 weeks.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Commissioners, any further discussion?
Yeah, just a little bit, tagging on to what you were talking about. Actually, I kind of lost track that we didn't allow restaurants in Main Street since it had to come through this commission in the first place, but I guess I forgot. But let's just look in the future somewhere. And again, that's not your project, it's the zoning in itself. Let's say the old house catches fire and burns down, or let's say the restaurant doesn't go as planned and it closes up, and the owner sells to somebody else, and now we get a used car lot on the corner. That's kind of where you're going, and I don't wish that on anybody, but it could happen. Any place could. This place could burn down tonight for all we know. So what are we doing for 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Like the chairman said, if we go GB, we lose control. We don't have any control on anything. GB is a big bag of monkeys, and there's a lot of stuff in there that I wouldn't want to see on Main Street. So is it completely and total out of the question that we can change the zoning, or are we stuck with what we have tonight?
They could make it.
So here's,
You have to do
here's, if I may, and I'll chime in. So, yeah, what P&Z can do is you can recommend, here's this zoning case, we're going to recommend a rezone to a different district that you feel is more appropriate. Now, what staff typically does when we get to City Council is we have a good relationship with developers and council, and we'll say, look, the applicant's saying, don't give me anything different, give me an up or down, and council's always been good about doing that, giving them an up or down on what they've asked for. So I will say this, that it prompted me to say we probably need to create a new zoning district like we created the Main Street mixed use that's maybe a bit more intensive, that allows the restaurant. The problem I see, having worked with a number of folks on the SUP, and Nick kind of mentioned, is it locks in that layout. And too often, because of these properties, the size and the shape, you often find as we get out there and get into it, we need to start making adjustments. Something doesn't quite fit, it doesn't quite work. And so I'm hesitant to recommend anything with an SUP, because I can tell you, I would bet we'd be halfway through the development and go, this doesn't fit, and staff's going, I don't have the discretion to tweak it. So my recommendation, if P&Z is saying, I'm just not comfortable with all the uses that are in the GB along with the restaurant, and we have a different district, neighborhood services, that allows restaurant by right, which is what the applicant wants to do, it's got some others there, my thought would be you recommend going neighborhood services. I think it balances that we're more comfortable with the uses once we've granted it, but yet it's not overly constraining. And you'll remember that's one of the things that we had as a challenge here, and again, I'll come back to this in a minute, but what we didn't want to do is deter people from trying stuff by overly restricting them and going, man, if this doesn't work, now I'm stuck and I'm in a real mess. And so I think the comment was really good, and I sat back there going, yeah, why haven't I probably know I haven't done it, I've been too busy with other stuff, I haven't gotten there, but what I think we really need to do is create another Main Street district that's a bit, allows some of the things we're starting to see, like restaurants, probably need to pull in some of the stakeholders and go, hey, what are those things that y'all feel make sense? They're compatible with the neighborhood, they're compatible with what we're seeing, and what are those things that you guys would say, yeah, I don't want another car lot coming in, make sure that's not allowed. And so maybe that's a step we do going forward. So that would be my thought, is not go the SUP route, because I think it's going to create problems. Go with something that allows by right, that's less intensive. We can certainly work with the applicant between now and council to see if he's good with that or not, but it keeps this one moving along.
Is an SUP, does that lock it in for life? Once we do an SUP on a particular lot?
For that land use.
Except it expires.
Yeah, if they don't go through with the
If you don't go through, then the SUP expires.
If you don't pull a building permit, the SUP with the approved site plan can expire, but that would lock in for that foreseeable development, that specific land uses layout.
Yeah, it's the
So if let's just say we make a zoning, we put a zoning in there that says you need a special use permit for a restaurant, and we grant that. That lot's a restaurant forever?
No, you've got all the uses that are allowed in that base
Right.
zoning district. You can also do a restaurant, but the restaurant has to be done in conformance with
Okay.
that site plan.
All right, I understand
It's
that.
site plan that's the problem on these.
And then on the bottom of a lot of these zoning districts, there is a new and unlisted use allowable under there, under a use permit, specific use permit. So you mentioned having something new or something that we haven't seen before. We have that authority, we have that leeway under mixed use, or Main Street, under the new and unlisted uses. So we could basically do whatever, I guess it depends on what the vision for Main Street is. And I think we all understand what we want Main Street to be. We don't want it to be a used car lot. We don't want it to be a car wash. We don't want it to be a wine store and all that kind of stuff. We don't want a specs down there, that kind of thing. We know what we want. And I kind of think, like the chairman, I don't want GB down there, because GB opens it up to whatever happens to be. Yeah. I mean, I appreciate what the developer wants to do, and I back him 100%. But that's not a guarantee that it's going to be the same for 10 years from now.
Sure. I guess to speak on that new and unlisted use, so while Brian was talking about of the new kind of zoning district, that would be different than Main Street mixed use, then the land use involved on the actual development would not be new and unlisted, because it's already a restaurant. So while in theory you do have the authority to grant a specific use permit for a new and unlisted use, the use applies to, say it's some sort of business that's not identified or represented within our permitted uses table, then that's what that would be used for. So the restaurant, like he's saying, it's already identified in the land use table, so it wouldn't be a new and unlisted use. That's more for the zoning district, like Brian was talking about.
Right, that's the fly in the ointment, that restaurants are already listed. So one option maybe to consider, how difficult would it be to amend the MSMU to allow restaurants?
We would be amending the zoning code. We would have to notice to everyone already zoned Main Street mixed use.
Okay.
And it'd be a UDC amendment.
Well, I just throw that out there as an idea. You're talking about maybe coming up with a new zoning district. Maybe we don't need to go quite that. I don't know what really the easier process is.
Yeah, so what I would say is, I think the benefit of the new zoning district is, we've heard some comments, and I think everybody's acknowledged, hey, a restaurant requires more parking than really the Main Street mixed use. And I don't know that even the folks that invested would say, hey, I'm okay with free reign on that, which is why I'm kind of saying I think a different district that says, look, it allows some different uses than Main Street mixed use, but it also sets some particular standards to those that's appropriate to those, so that when you grant this other district, or Main Street mixed use 2, you know that we've accounted for the aspects of that use that could impact the folks around it.
Okay. And we've been talking about Main Street developments back before I retired, and the issue has always been parking. And I used to I'm a patron of the Majestic Theater downtown San Antonio. How many parking spaces do they have? 0. Okay. I have a parking garage on the corner, but I kind of applied the same criteria. Our problem with Old Main Street down here is the whole parking issue, and it's, you know, the city has tried to solve it with Union Pacific route. I see Mr. Marquez doing his part, trying to help us to where you don't have to necessarily park right at that business. You can park across the street or something and walk. So if I understood you correctly, Mr. James, we don't have to send an up or down, a straight up or down to council. We can amend this, we can make our recommendation and say, we recommend you do neighborhood services versus, okay? Now, help me out here. Why do we skip office and professional? Why do we?
So I would have to go back. I think the neighborhood services, because, and here's what I would say. I believe the neighborhood services allow more retail-oriented and service uses than the office does. And you know, even when we talk about these other places, you go down to Fredericksburg, you go down to Bernie, they've got those sorts of uses.
Yeah, okay.
What you don't, and this is a bit what I would say, is even just the name of it, offices tend to be Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And what we have said is we are trying to get Monday through Friday, 5 to 10, 5 to midnight, Saturday, Sunday. And so again, I think that's probably a better fit for the range of uses like we're seeing start to hop around, which is my initial.
Okay.
I think it could attract more likely businesses that would be associated with, like it says, neighborhood services outside of large residential neighborhoods, which you have, I mean, abound above this area.
Would a zoning of neighborhood services versus general business, would that cause any problems for you in your project? What
I wouldn't think so.
What would you think?
So
the only issue really.
Yeah, the neighborhood services is the same as general business. Okay. So what I would say, and this is probably, again, I can appreciate putting on the spot, if the commission says, look, hey, we're more comfortable with neighborhood services or the office, I'd recommend that to move it along. We then will sit down with the applicant, go through all those uses. He may come back and go, oh, I can't live with either one of those. I'll take it up with council or say I prefer the other. But I think what it does is your record is there. The concern of some of the uses gets to council and it keeps this one moving. So we'd probably sit down with him next couple of days, go through those uses, hash it out.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, I'm trying to stall a little bit till Commissioner Greenwald comes back before we
So I have a question, and
go ahead, sir.
I don't know if Nick can answer it, but if this all goes GB and then in the future, how do we control and make sure that that idea of Main Street is maintained? In other words, once it's a GB, we can't stop them from putting anything in that list, right?
anything permitted by right within the general business zoning district would be allowed without your reapproval, if that makes sense, just on the land use sake.
Okay, thanks.
That's what Richard was saying, that it's, while we all like what he's proposing, 20 years from now, he might keel over and they sell all of it.
All right.
No offense.
Well, real quick for the record, and I don't know if that was picked up, the two commissioners we were just hashing out that general business, what we have to try to do here is separate the project from the zoning. And the discussion here was just that once we zone it general business, anything that's a permitted use under general business could be put there. Again, we love your project and we love to see it going, but nobody really knows what, we wish we had a crystal ball. We really do. Commissioners.
Do any of the other commissions have a look-forward plan of development of what they want to see for Main Street? Does Main Street Development Committee, there's the Economic Development Board, is anybody else involved in this and guiding and developing this project, say what you want to see 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
We have an element in the city's comprehensive plan for Main Street in particular. And I will say that, and some of you have been through this, the thing that we heard the most, and that the vision really lays out, are for restaurants and frankly probably bars, but I would describe it as the bar that you go to after work with your coworkers and that your spouse shows up and meets you and maybe has another drink, as opposed to where's the bar that we go to get in a fight or a thing like that with your coworkers. And so I think that was really the key to the vision. And again, they pointed to a lot of other cities, and don't want to make a full comparison, but I think the feeling was that restaurant, that dining, evening activity, specialty shops, things like that going forward. I think while there was respect for the auto-related uses and the services they provide and the employment and what they add to our economy, the idea was if we can kind of make this transition, then the market sort of moves that along and they say, wow, let's sell this and make a bundle and set up shop somewhere else and bring that use in. And so that's a bit of why we've not done those city-initiated rezone, is to try to move it along that way. But you're right, I think what you'll get is 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, it's going to be different. We're going to have to address some of the things that are problematic at that time that were more tolerable now.
I think I haven't been to a Main Street Committee meeting in quite a while, but from what I remember, I think this project fits right, and the staff's analysis is dead on, that this is exactly the vision that City Council and the Main Street Committee have for that area down there. Commissioner Greenwald, you have anything?
If I may, really quickly, just to show you guys a reference, I apologize, it's super tiny, it's on my phone. If you see this right here, so this is retail stores and shops. This one on the second to the left is the column for Main Street mixed use. Mm-hmm. This is for office and professional, and this is for neighborhood services.
Okay, gotcha.
I think if your idea for that retail stores and shops wouldn't be permitted in office professional.
Well, thank you. That's very good explanation. Commissioner?
I haven't looked up the definition of a tavern, but a tavern is not allowed in neighborhood services. So is a tavern, would the bar house be a tavern? What is a tavern? Is that it? Or would that restrict you in any way? Because I'd kind of favor neighborhood services, but it's the question of the tavern is not allowed under neighborhood services, and a car wash is permitted under neighborhood services. I don't think we need another car wash on Main Street. Can we pick and choose what's allowed and not? Damn it.
Allows the tavern, allows the restaurant, and then again, at some point, the applicant can come through, say, all right, great, let me rezone to that and move the thing along. I think, the more I think about it, that's really what we probably need to do to get where you want to be, which is, hey, let's really go through that list of uses, and obviously we work for you guys on that too.
I have to assume that this restaurant, you'd want to sell the alcoholic beverages would be, you might even have in my mind, that's a restaurant with a bar, not a tavern.
It's a different kind of permit. Nick knows work with TABC, so if it's a restaurant.
Yeah. Because what the negative comment that came in was about alcohol, but that's all regulated by a whole nother, you know, within a certain range of schools, that's all regulated by another whole set of, so I'm not concerned about that. All right. Anybody, any further?
I'm fine with going with neighborhood services. I just don't think general business is correct. So I can go along with sending this to council as neighborhood services.
Would you like to make that a motion?
That other commissioners have probably
Pardon?
thinking about that too.
Well, yeah, we have a choice here. We can, you know, there's all kinds of options. We can, now this is a recommendation to City Council. We can recommend denial. We can recommend approval but neighborhood services, or we can just send it forward as it is and recommend approval of general business. So those are the kind of options that we have. If someone would like to.
All right. In the case of ZC 2020-004, I will recommend that we send to City Council an approval to rezone into neighborhood services and deny general business.
I have a motion to recommend neighborhood services and not general business. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Greenwald. Further discussion, questions? There being none, I'll call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Mr. Evans, that was an aye? And I vote aye. So 7 ayes, no nays. So we'll recommend to City Council that they approve it for neighborhood services. And you guys will look and see if that, and if it's going to cause any problems, again, because I think we all, once again, it's not about the project itself, and we love what he's trying to do. So, all right. Thank you. Okay. All righty, that's 6A, and moving on to items for individual consideration. PC 20, pardon? That was 6A, right? What we just
7A.
did. What we just did was 6A, and we're moving on now to 7A, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, this is 7A.
Okay. PC 2020-012, consider and act upon a request for approval of a preliminary plat of the QT 4032 subdivision, an approximately 16-acre tract of land located at the northwest corner of the intersection between IH-35 and Schwab Road, City of Schertz, not Bexar County, Texas. That's what Comal County.
Excuse us, yes. We'll correct that for the City Council.
Okay, so that's actually Comal County, I
Yes, sir.
believe. Also known as 23953 IH-35 North. Nick?
Yep, as you said, it's in Comal County, not Bexar County, Comal County, not Bexar County, sorry about that. For familiarity's sake, once again, this project should look a little familiar, right here at the northwest corner of I-35 and Schwab Road. The applicant's proposing to preliminary plat around 16 acres of land into 3 different commercial lots in order to develop a convenience store with gas pumps on this Lot 1, Block 2 here, specific use permit for that, and an associated site plan for that land use was approved by council in October 2019 before a recommendation of approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission earlier that month. Access to the site is going to be permitted, or site will be accessible through the I-35 frontage road, through Schwab Road, and through Ball Lane. What you'll see, these dotted lines, and we can go into kind of further detail so you can see what they're actually labeled on the plat itself. I'm not sure if it's labeled on this exact sheet, but what they are, they're access easements to increase connectivity between the 3 lots right here where you're seeing these dashed lines, and then it's extended all the way to the western property edge to extend that access along the I-35 frontage road. With that, the preliminary plat meets all other applicable UDC requirements. It's been reviewed and recommended for approval by the entire development team. The applicant is not here, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have.
All right, thank you, sir. Yeah, I looked at this and I say, didn't we do this already?
It should look familiar, yeah.
Then
You've
looking
seen
at
the
your
site
memo,
plan
no.
and the SUP.
Yeah, that was the SUP and the
circle
site
now.
plan.
Almost.
Commissioners, questions, comments?
Yes, just some curiosity questions. Who provides sewer and water for this area?
Let's see.
Can't find it on the maps.
You can't find it what?
I can't find it on the package.
City of Schertz, water and sewer.
But where does it go after that? I mean, where does Schertz get the water from?
Where do we get the water from?
Green Valley, SSLGC, San Antonio.
SSLGC.
How about
Yeah, that's city water up there. They years ago, they ran that main up 35 specifically when Blacks built their warehouse. So that's all City of Schertz water.
And wastewater, is that GBU or is it CCMA?
Schertz CCMA. Correct?
GBU?
So let me say this. I am not sure which way it gets pumped. You know, we have rights to send some stuff to NBU.
Yeah, NBU, I'm sorry.
So I cannot remember, but I believe that's in our area, and we have an agreement with some.
NBU.
It may go up to NBU.
It is NBU.
And then the drainage for this doesn't come down to the Cibolo, it goes north, correct? To the, what's that, dry Comal?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? And this complies with the site plan and the SUP? I mean, the lines are in the right places?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I figured. But you know I got to ask.
I can show you the lot for, that's
Oh, no, you don't need to do
specific
that.
to it.
We're good. All right.
This one.
Commissioners, if we don't have anything else, anyone want to make a motion?
Make a motion, we approve PC 2020-012 for preliminary plat of the QT 4032 subdivision as presented.
You have a
The
motion?
modification to Bear County.
Yeah. So I have a motion
We'll fix
from
that legal
Commissioner
description.
Greenwald to approve. Do I have a second?
A second.
Mr. Ray, that's you? All right, and a second by Commissioner Ray. Any further discussion? Call for the vote?
Aye.
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 Aye. All right. 7-0 once again. Thank you. Item 8, requests and announcements. Item A, request by commissioners to place items on a future planning and zoning agenda. Commissioners, anyone want to put something on the agenda?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Commissioner?
I'd like to fast-track the new zoning district for Main Street Mixed Use 2, whatever. Put that on a fast track.
Anyone else?
You brought it up.
All right, item B, announcements by commissioners. Anyone have anything this evening? Just a quick question. Mr. James, you have just a couple minutes after the meeting I could talk to you? No, it's only 2. It's all I need, okay? All right, item C, announcements by city staff. Nothing. All right, sir. Well, there being no further business for the commission, this meeting's adjourned.